Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're building the MiG-21UM Mongol from Condor in scale 1:72, and as you can see, the kit comes packed in this single plastic bag. I have thrown away the cover because it was all soggy and crushed because of the rains. And here's a look at the original box when it existed in its better days. So for those who want to have a look at it, please do and have a good laugh, because that picture certainly doesn't look like anywhere close to a MiG-21UM, but thankfully everything else inside the box was intact. So let's open up the bag and see the contents. Alright, so sprue 1 with the wings, sprue 2 with the not so clear parts, really foggy, sprue number 3 with another wing and the ejection seats and the seat rails with a few drop tanks, and the fourth sprue with the 2 fuselage halves, and that's the one that looks really nice, followed by the decals, and these have the markings for the Soviet Air Force, the Polish Air Force. It has some cockpit instrument panel markings and a really strange marking. Is that Israeli? I don't think so. That should have been a white star instead then. Anyway, let's have a look at the instruction sheet and we'll find out. So a single foldable instruction sheet with 2 exploded diagrams, one showing the top view and the other the bottom view, and it explains everything in these 2 diagrams. Pretty easy to understand but difficult to follow. And in the end you have the standard Soviet Air Force markings, followed by, wow, German Air Force markings. This is so amazing. You know, that's the good part about Condor. They give you a total mismatch of the decals against the marking guides, and also give you a goodie of an unknown marking in the Star of David in red. Alright, so I've cut out the cockpit part from the sprues, and here you can see that there is a fair deal of flash inside the cockpit tub right here, and even the edges of the cockpit tub are very rough, so they will need a lot of sanding. And similar is the case with the seats. They are kind of okay looking seats for a 72nd scale model, but they will need a lot of cleanup of the flash and the leftover after the parts were cut off from the sprues. So these will need a lot of sanding as well. And so here you can see me getting to work. I am cutting out the excess flash with my snippers and then using a 180 grit sanding stick to sand down the edges of the cockpit tub from the sides every moment, sanding and making sure that the edges are smoothing out. And also I would have to clean up a lot of flash that was left over after the cockpit tub was cut out from the sprues. Alright, so as you can see, the flash has been almost cleaned up from the cockpit tub, although there's still a little bit of finesse that is required. But I've cleaned up the flash from the seats, from the ejection rails, from the control columns and the instrument panels. And now I am ready to assemble the constituent parts of the cockpit into the cockpit tub. Alright, so that's how the assembled cockpit looks like. It looks pretty neat from a distance. Now the instrument panel is totally bland, so I used my pin vise to drill out a few holes to simulate the instruments inside the instrument panel. So I kept a reference picture of the MiG-21UM cockpit in front of me and began drilling out the holes to simulate the actual instruments inside the MiG-21 cockpit. And you can multiply that effort by 2 because, well, there are 2 instrument panels. Alright, so now on to the main assembly. So I'm cutting off the two fuselage halves from their sprues and I'm going to join them up. But before that, here's a look at all the flash that's present inside the two fuselage halves. Those will need certain bit of cleanup. And here, look at that big flash sticking out right where the wing attaches into the fuselage. So after the cleanup, then I began with the painting process, and I started off with the cockpit green, and I began spraying the cockpit green onto the entire instrument panel and the cockpit walls, as you can see here. Alright, so at this point the fuselage halves have been assembled. I also scratch built two pilot figures, and this was my first attempt at scratch building 72nd scale pilot figures. It took me about 10 attempts to get to the right one, and now I am cutting out the wings from the sprues, cleaning up the excess flash that was left over from the horizontal stabilizer and the wing. And this is where I noticed that the landing light placeholder for the starboard wing is literally protruding outside the wing, so I had to sand that down smooth so that it could make proper space for the landing light to fit in. The assembly of the wings and the horizontal stabilizers was pretty straightforward, and once I assembled the wings inside the fuselage, I just checked for the horizontal alignment of the wings. They are slightly bent upwards, so you have to hold them down when you glue them, but not really a big challenge there. And this thing finally begins to look like a MiG-21UM, albeit much better than the one that was there on the cover art. This front ring would have to be sanded smooth to align with the body. The nose section will have to be filled to hide this entire seam that goes right up to the vertical stabilizer. There's a lot of gap in the vertical stabilizer contact with the fuselage, and there's also a little gap in the wing root assembly with the fuselage. A similar case of filling the seams that stretch right from the front of the nose to the ventral fin on the underside of the fuselage. Plus, this little circular gap on top of the starboard wing will also have to be filled. And here's a look at the really clear parts. They will have to be progressively sanded smooth with 600, 1200, 2000 and 3000 grit sandpapers, followed by the polishing with the Tamiya coarse, fine and finishing compounds to give it the final proper shine. And there you have it, shiny as new. And so I primed the whole aircraft with Bosnic grey primer and began the pre-shading with Fevicryl black.
The pre-shading was then followed up by painting up the first camouflage tone with Fevicryl khaki brown, which is basically brown black mixed with a little bit of green. And once that was dry, I began painting the second camo tone of light green. I basically masked off the whole camo pattern using blue tack and then began painting the light green pattern. I then moved on to applying the decals and used my standard procedure of decal application. All the decals and markings were printed at home. I then began the weathering process by using the Camlin chalk wash. Basically, I've used a Camlin black chalk pastel, diluted it with water and added some dishwashing liquid, and then applied it liberally all over the model to simulate some grime and streaks. Once the chalk had dried, I used a kitchen towel to wipe off the excess in the direction of flow of air, and finally fine-tuned everything with a cotton Q-tip. And once everything was done, I sealed the whole thing in the future gloss varnish, and I will now call the model complete. So before I conclude, a little bit of history on this particular airframe U661. This is a MiG-21UM. It is basically a two-seat fighter conversion trainer, and it was used extensively to train pilots for the MiG-21 FL, M, MF and BIS fighters. The MiG-21UMs were purchased from Russia. However, in 1991, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, India, just like other Eastern Bloc countries, was left looming in the dark for defense spares and supplies. Now, this particular airframe was serving with the Romanian Air Force at that time, and Romania had begun pursuing the American F-16 and wanted to retire its entire fleet of old Soviet-era fighters. So Romania very generously offered the Indian Air Force one of their trainers that was actually destined for a Romanian museum. And India, that was willing to cut costs to maintain its defense fleet, was quick to click the buy button, and Romania offered it at a throwaway price to the Indian Air Force. And that's how this particular airframe landed up in the Indian Air Force in the original Romanian Air Force colors. So I hope you enjoyed watching the video as much as I enjoyed building this kit. If you like the content, please don't forget to smash that like button. Do consider subscribing to the channel because that helps me grow. And if you like more of this content, please stay tuned for the next video. I'll see you again soon.